I do believe I have caught my shirt on fire. Hey, Chuck. It is a cold, snowy, wet, nasty January day. It's too cold for the birds to even be out and about. Their little feet will get stuck right to the ground. So, not a lot to do out here without frostbite or losing appendages. So, let's go ahead and go in the shop and work on Stacey's hot rod. Alright, what we got here? We're going to replace Stacey's upper control arms with these Racecraft units. I really like these a lot instead of the old box style that you see on a lot of the upper control arms. These have a slim profile. So if you've got the typical anti-roll bar set up, this gives you a little more clearance before it actually bangs into the anti-roll bar when you're letting it down super low. Putting new spherical bushings in it because the one that's on there now has got the kind that hangs off the side, and I'll show you that in a bit. And we're going to install these doublers on the upper control arm torque boxes and on the vehicle side. This will reinforce it a little bit, keep it from oblonging the holes out, and give us another adjustment point. And we're going to use these are the old jigs that I got from Racecraft to do this with originally when I did it to 4-lug thug. So let's crawl in here and look and see what we got. All right. Now, the car was mini tubbed, and it's got some Menser Avco shocks and like a UPR upper anti-roll bar here. It's got these little cheesy supports on the housing, and it looks, yeah, it does have these, if I can get where you can see it. I think those are like Team Z lower control arm housing brackets that allows you to adjust and go down. That's like the most important bracket on these whole setup to get this thing done. You can really get away with just that if everything else is stout and braced up. The other points you can kind of manipulate with this and ride height, but you typically see people replace the torque boxes, and you can see somebody's welded that up, so that's good. And the uppers, we got some extra welding on it too. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add those doublers to these boxes here instead of putting new boxes in. If these boxes are in good shape, they've never been twisted or tore up or anything, really we don't need all that many adjustment points, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to end up in the factory location or pretty close to it anyway. So these short upper bars, when you go to lower this car or move the ride height, they're a lot shorter than the lower bars, so they change angle a lot faster than the long bars. So when you go to lower the car, this may change a few degrees. This changes a whole bunch because it's so short. So you can really manipulate your geometry on this car with ride height. So what we're going to do, we're going to put that actual one in there, because when we lower the car a bunch, we're going to put it probably up one hole so that the bar angle doesn't get too extreme. And we're still going to end up with in the 140 to 160% of anti-squat most likely with this setup. So you can see here it's got these old cheesy upper control arms here. I think these are UPR or something. They they actually hang the bar on the outside of the rear end housing tab here. Instead of it straddling it like they do from the factory and like every other bar does, this thing hangs on the outside, puts every bit of the stress of this thing on that bolt, on the end of that bolt, and side loads the tab on the housing. I mean, I guess it'd be okay for 300 horsepower car or something, street strip deal or something, I don't know, but we're gonna get that out of there. So let's drop this rear end housing down and get busy. Pinion snubber in a race car. Get these daggum bushings out of here. Pain in the butt, but not as big of a pain in the butt as the factory ones. All right, here is the good ones from Racecraft. Show you what the difference is in these things here. See how these screw together? Nice. And they have a nice spherical bearing in there. And these go in like so. Sure that Racecraft does not tell you to use a pipe wrench, but when you're a redneck, you're a redneck. What do you do? Alright, that's it there. And you see then these will straddle it like this, which will have spacers in there. But that's the right way to do it. That way the load is going across both sides of this, so got a lot more strength to it. Anyway, that's that. Let's cut the tailman on there. Alrighty, so here we have our stock upper control arm torque box. Now this one here is not beat up at all. It's in good shape. The holes aren't oblonged out. When I did mine were actually already starting to egg shape pretty bad, but these are in good shape. They have been welded up a little bit, but not completely. They put a little bit in here, a couple spots there, you see, but really need some in here. This is the vital area. This is a big stout cross member right here this thing is onto, so I need to go around here and get it here a little bit and in there. But first of all, we're going to cut this frame rail out so we can actually drill out our holes. The object here is to make these holes 5/8, which makes them get a stronger bolt. You know, normally in most like 4 links and stuff like that, you see a 1/2 inch bolt. The reason why this kind of needs a 5/8 inch is because it's such a big spread. There's a big distance between these. Usually on a regular 4-link system, it's only wide as the rod end, but here we have these spacers that space this thing out to get this control arm mounted up, and we don't want to put too much stress on the bolt. So a 5/8 bolt helps a bunch. Also, it just gives you a bigger surface in the hole. It doesn't beat it up as bad. As the bigger it is, the more it spreads the load out. So anyway, to get this thing drilled out, as you can see, we can line up with it, but it's right there. You've got this frame rail right dead in the way, especially when we try to do the one above it. And so this is our little jig here, and with this jig, you'll see we're going to actually put a hole above that hole. So to do that, if you try to do that here, you can see you're not gonna be able to get your drill in there to do that. So we got to cut a big notch out of this frame here, and then we'll save it, and then we'll put it back in there when we're done. So now we're not going to do all this with, this isn't going to be some high-end race car bazillion-dollar chassis job here. We're just going to MIG weld this thing in here. It's easy to get to that way. And quite frankly, we're on the ground here, laying down under a car, and I'm fat and old, and I just really, don't feel like trying to get in there with a TIG torch and get that. So we're going to just MIG it in there, and it'll work just fine. So we're going to go ahead and get this cut out and get this hole drilled out, and then do our other hole there. Here we've got our frame rail notched out. Of course, we're going to put that back when we're done. We got our original bolt hole drilled out with the 5/8 drill bit for the larger 5/8 bolts. Then we put our jig in here, and this jig you can see it you wedge it, you put it in there, and you use these nuts to tighten it up and keep it in position when you get it where you want it. But what you do here, you just go in there with your drill bit. When it comes out the other side, you center it up on this hole and do the same thing, and that gives you your holes exactly where they need to be. And Racecraft recommends this thing to set back a little bit, like this, back towards the front of the car a little bit. And I'm sure that's just because of the design of this thing, because you can adjust the upper control arms to have whatever length you need if you got adjustable control arms. Like if you're doing this, I'm sure you have. And but the main thing is that you get this angle the same on both sides. So left and right side of the car, you don't want one all way up here and one way back there. But if it's off a hair, it's not going to really matter, because the car itself isn't dead square and even to begin with. These cars are not even close to being perfect. Especially if they've been raced and beat on. They're a little different on every single one you get in. You just gotta do the best you can with it, and then have the adjustability to tune and get it dialed in when you actually start running the car. But what I'm gonna do is, they say go off of the Racecraft recommends going off at the bottom of the rocker panel, which I can't really even get to it because I got it sitting on these quick jacks here. But you can go off the flat part of your frame rail back here, and it's pretty close. Just so you've got a number to go off of to make each side the same. Like, in other words, take this number, and subtract them and see what the difference is between the two, and then make that the same over there. So these angles are the same, because your car might not be setting perfectly level. Even a nice flat garage floor, they some have a little slope to it, especially some of the ones that was poured for drainage, where the water drains to a out to the door or to a drain itself. So, need something to reference off of to get it pretty close. Main thing is it's just not way off. That's pretty much it. What I do is I just go ahead and use one of these. This gives you this little angle finder here. You can stick on there and kind of judge it and make sure that you get both left and right side the same. Use as a reference, I went off the bottom of the frame rail here. But the problem with that is if you watch this thing, it'll change so much just from every little thing. Here, I'll give you an example here. Here's your frame rail. All right, 1.2, huh? 1.1, 1.1. You can see it's, and then now you're at a half a degree. So I mean, these things, you can tell they're not really flat and perfect. So being this thing is so small, it fits in every little bend and crease in this thing. So another thing you can use, it's a lot cheaper, you can get one of these things, little magnetic type deals there, and they're you can get one of these things from like Harbor Freight for like $3 or something, I think. But you can use that, and it's a whole lot easier, I think, sometimes to use something that's not so sensitive for every little tiny movement. And you can just go around here and transfer that right to your piece there. All right, so got our extra bolt holes drilled using our little jig, and you can see they're nice and straight on in there. This is pretty and looks like Ford did it. Anyway, so got it all sanded off, got all the paint off that area so we can weld in our doublers. And we went ahead and cleaned up around some more of this around the factory torque box there to put some extra welds in there, just to do a little extra more than what someone had already done, and cleaned up around our notch so we can put our piece of frame rail back in also. So let's go ahead and get the welder hooked up and zip that on in there. All right, so we got our doublers welded in on both sides here. Whenever you put these things in, you always want to make sure you run after you get them in, before you put your piece of frame rail back in, chase those holes, clean them out one time with your drill before putting this in, or else you can't get back to it. And sure as the world, you'll get this a little bit off a hair, or to get a piece of slag or something go in it, and you won't be able to get your freaking bolt through there. So it's a good idea to clean those things out when you're done. Also, we added some welds to the torque box here where places hadn't been done before, And I also added these 2 nuts. That's not something you normally do with this job, but I like to do it because it really reinforces these bolt holes really well. They can't wiggle whatsoever if your nuts are actually welded or actually tacked to this bracket. They won't fit if you just scoot them in there because they won't go close enough together, so you have to grind off a little bit of one flat on each nut so you can scoot them closer together. But doing that, whenever you get working on this thing from the future, you don't have to hold it with 2 wrenches to get it turned in there. It's already a pain to get in here anyway. That way you just throw a socket on this side here and you ain't got to worry about this side over here. It'll hold itself. So anyway, that's that. Now we're gonna put this piece of frame rail back in and throw some paint on it so it don't rust, and we'll move on to the next part of this project. All right, so we got our frame rail back in and everything else is done. This is where you would normally paint it and be done with it. The extra I did here with these nuts, you don't have to do that. And most people are probably gonna think it's dumb anyway, but you can just stop before that step and just leave that off. That's what most people do. The main reason I do this, not only does it make it easy to get the bolt in and out, you don't have to hold it with a wrench, but also my next thing I add to this little deal that you really don't need to do, but it's just something I like to do, and that is I put a strap, piece of flat stock from here to there. Once you do that, you can't get to these nuts anymore, so therefore you don't need to if you've got them tacked on there and you don't have to worry about it. The reason I put the strap there is it ties this edge right here. Like in my opinion, like you could probably bend this edge if you had something on it, in or out, this way or that way. It's pretty strong because it's got a formed edge. It actually rolls over, so it's pretty strong anyway. I don't think it's gonna. Most people would never. I think you'd never have a problem out of it. I could leave it off. I'm sure it wouldn't matter. But I just do it for the heck of it while I'm in here. But I put that piece of strap on there, so it ties this corner edge to the frame, so it can no longer move whatsoever. And if it can't, then really neither can this side, because it's tied together with your control arm being in there. So this side is 100%. This side's along for the ride. You don't have to worry about it ever moving or pulling loose or bending and getting out of whack or whatever. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that little piece of strap, weld it in there, throw some paint on it, we'll be done. All right, here's our finished product. Got everything all braced up, welded up. Got the new Racecraft upper control arm in there, so you can see what that looks like. Went ahead and went with the upper bolt hole. This, we're not sure if that's where it's gonna stay or not. The lower one is the stock bolt hole. This is actually raising it up one. So that's what worked in my car. I'm not sure it's gonna work in his because we don't know if we can get this car as low as mine. But we'll find out once we get everything back in here and set up. So we'll move on next to beefing up the lower control arm torque boxes some more, upgrading those also to a 5/8 bolt. Then we will race up the rear end housing, and we're going to change the gear, put a little higher, a little lower gear set in there, higher numeric, lower ratio gear set. We're going to change the springs out on his coilovers to a lighter and longer spring, and we'll get everything put back in the car. Then we're going to go over how to plot the suspension out. I use software that allows you to plug in all the numbers and set it up and actually see what changes would do to it. Even you can even make adjustments in the ride height and see how that would affect your instant center and your anti-squat numbers and all that good stuff. So we'll do all that in each step of this process. So this is episode 1. There'll be several episodes in suspension of this car. And then we're actually going to move up and we're going to change out his front coilovers. We're going to put a new set of Menser double adjustable AFCO coilovers in the front of this car. And right now it's got strange single adjustables on there. He wanted to change those out, so we're going to do that. So this is episode 1. Follow along for the rest. Safety disclaimer. Some of the things that I did in this video, or may not have done, could have been camera tricks, may be considered unsafe and careless. Some of those things may have been, but not limited to, welding with no gloves, holding metal while cutting it and grinding on it. Always put that advice, don't hold that with your hands. I do a lot of dumb things sometimes, but you shouldn't. Always take the proper safety precautions when using tools and machinery and working on automobiles. Don't be a Chuck. Chuck out.